This is Brenda Stevens' interview with a hiring manager. I have my friend Melissa Little here, and she has agreed for me to interview her. And I have some questions ready for her for interviewing a hiring manager. So, Melissa, can you tell us what types of industries you have been a hiring manager for?
So most recently is when I owned my own business, which was a bakery, and I did all the hiring for that. And then before that, I actually worked for a very large pharmaceutical company, and I did hiring for them. I hired salespeople.
Okay. I guess I just want to jump right in. Something to think about when you're hiring people is an interview. Is it okay for a person to show up more than 5 or 10 minutes early to an interview?
For me personally, yes, especially when I was doing the more professional interviewing for the pharmaceutical company, because some interviews may go more quickly and you typically are doing several in one day. So if someone shows up early and they're prepared, then you can go ahead and move along instead of getting behind for the day. When you kind of have to read the person also, the hiring manager, if they tell you not to show up early because of space limitations, because the last thing you want is to be interviewing one candidate and have someone else sitting there listening to it, and that was kind of the case in the bakery, because there wasn't a lot of room to have privacy, then you wouldn't want to show up early. So it really kind of depends on the position you're interviewing for and your feedback from the hiring manager.
What do you need in an employee? What is the definition of a good hire?
Well, for me, you want somebody who's serious about the job, that they want to be there. They're not just taking the job because they have to have a job. You want somebody who's planning to stick around for a while. It's very expensive to hire new employees. Part of that is the training process, and it takes a while for a new employee to get up and running and to be comfortable with what they're doing. So if you have turnover where you're constantly having to retrain new people, you're spending a lot of money in training that person. So for me, longevity, someone who gets along well with others, and someone who can really hit the ground running is a good hire.
What can I tell my students are the benefits to them for being a good hire?
To be a good hire, they need to have a good work ethic. They need to be prompt and punctual. I often ask candidates when I interview them, especially if this is a position where they're recently out of school, whether it's college or high school, I ask them how many days they missed in the last year, because that will give me an indication as to how many days I can expect them to miss. In some positions when you're hiring people, you don't have a backup person, so you're depending on them to be there. Now you understand people get sick, family emergencies happen, but if you have somebody who's missed a lot of school or doesn't turn a lot of their assignments in, that's a good indication that they're going to be the same way in their first job, so I would be hesitant about hiring them. Appearance is important, and especially people who are working with the public. So for example, a salesperson or working in the bakery, if you really want that job, you need to have a professional appearance, and that includes not having blue hair, not having piercings everywhere, having a good attitude, being polite, having manners, because even though that's your right, it's also my right as a hiring manager to look out for my business and what I think my customers are going to want to see.
It's a really good point. Excuse me. Could you give me an example of a couple of questions that you would ask in an interview?
Absolutely. If this is not their first job, I would ask them why they're looking for a job and why they left their last job. So if it's because they're bored, or they didn't get along with their manager, or they didn't get along with their coworkers, that's a red flag for me. Another one I always ask is, who, in all of your work experience, who was your favorite manager and why? And then I always follow that up with, who was your least favorite manager and why? You can tell a lot about a person based on why they like or dislike someone, especially someone that they report to. I would also ask them what their career goals are and where they saw themselves in the next year and 5 years. And then the big question I would ask is, why do you want this job? Of all the jobs that are listed out there, why do you want this one? And I always follow up, well, why should I hire you? And they need to be able to answer those questions.
Do you think it's beneficial for a candidate to ask questions to you in the interview?
Absolutely. If a candidate doesn't ask me questions, they are already crossed off my list. Because I feel that the interview process, I'm interviewing them, but they're also interviewing me and my company. And if they don't have questions, that tells me they're not really concerned about who they're working for. And I don't know that it would necessarily be a good fit then.
So when you're hiring, give me an example of some traits that you're looking for in an individual. I know you touched a little bit about that, but just a couple of traits that you think are important in a good hire.
I think someone who is friendly, someone who presents themselves well, someone who can speak and put together a complete sentence, someone that is respectful. I also think, as I said before, being punctual is very important. So if a person is late to the interview, in my opinion, they may as well not even show up. Another one is they need to have attention to detail. So if I get a resume or an application that has a typo on it, or misspelling or poor grammar, they won't even make it to the interview phase. That one goes immediately into the trash can.
Is it okay for a candidate to reveal their weaknesses?
I think so, but I think when people go in for an interview, they have to expect the question. They should always expect these two questions: what is your greatest strength, and what is your greatest weakness? Now, the trick to the weakness part is to point out what your weakness is, because if you say I don't have any, everybody has a weakness. We all do.
Agree.
Well, present company excluded, but we all have our weaknesses. But the what you need to do with that is how then do you turn that weakness into a strength? So if you point out that your weakness is, I don't know, pick something, how can you turn that around and use it to your advantage? Or how do you work on fixing that because you know it's a weakness? So it's acknowledging it and then how you address it.
So just a couple more questions. When you're sitting down with the candidate, you're looking at kind of two sides of a coin. You're looking at their skills as far as like, what they can actually do and if they're using correct spelling and grammar. And then you're also looking at things like we call soft skills, their teamwork, their collaboration skills. Do you place more importance on those skills as far as being able to spell correctly, or do you think it's more important to be able to collaborate and have teamwork?
Well, it's a combination of both. But I would take someone who has better soft skills, because if they have good soft skills, if they have good people skills, they're trainable, they are willing to learn, they handle conflict well, they work well with others, I think they can be taught some of the technical things. Now, obviously, that doesn't come into play if you're hiring a doctor, but it does in other areas where it's trainable. So someone who has those soft skills you can train. There are lots of times where people are stronger in the other areas, and you can't teach the soft skills as easily as you can teach the technical skills. So I will take a person that I can train and teach that already has the good customer service, they work well with others, they are a problem solver. I'll take those any day over someone who has all the right education.
I just have an odd question. Do you think handwritten notes, thank you notes, like someone that you interview and then they leave, and if you receive a handwritten thank you note in the mail, do you think that's outdated?
Nope. In fact, they go to the top of my list.
Yeah, I agree. Just two more questions.
Okay.
What are the things hiring managers wish schools could do to help ensure a better workforce for the future?
I think that one is attention to detail, instilling a good work ethic, completing work, being prepared for what they want to do, and knowing themselves and knowing so that when I'm asking them questions, what are your goals in a year from now? Where do you want to be in 5 years? Students need to be prepared to answer those questions. And I think students need to be prepared to have that one-on-one conversation in an interview. I mean, there might be an interview where they have 3 or 4 people in the room that's interviewing just them. And they have to be prepared to be able to do that. And so presentation skills, being able to speak in front of people is very important.
Last question.
Okay.
What advice do you have for me as a career counselor?
I think one is just helping kids understand how to get a job and then how to keep the job. Teaching them the job is not there for them, they're there for the job. So how do they add value to their employer? Because if they don't add value to the employer, the next person will, and I'm going to hire that person. And I will tell you one thing that I always end my interview with. I want the person to ask for the job. That tells me they're interested. So teaching them, if you want it, you need to ask for it. So if they at the end, if they don't ask me for the job, they're probably not going to get it.
Good thoughts. All right, we're wrapped up. Thank you, Melissa.
No problem.